The fluorescent lights of the Willow Ridge Community Clubhouse cast a sterile, unforgiving glare on the proceedings. It was the third Tuesday of the month, which meant it was time for the Homeowners Association Board of Directors meeting. Arthur Chandler sat in the third row, his back straight, his hands resting calmly on his knees. He had learned in the Navy that posture was 90% of presence. At 72, his presence was one of quiet, unshakable gravity. The open forum segment was drawing to a close. A nervous-looking man was finishing a complaint about dog waste near the playground, his voice trembling slightly under the impassive gaze of the five-member board seated at a long folding table. At the center of that table, like a queen presiding over a reluctant court, was Karen Delaney. Karen was the HOA president, a title she wore with the same crisp, militant precision as her cream-colored blazer. Her hair was a helmet of blonde efficiency, her smile a carefully calibrated instrument of social control. She adjusted the microphone, the metallic scrape echoing in the hushed room. "Thank you for your feedback, Mr. Henderson. The board will take your concerns regarding pet sanitation under advisement." Her tone was as pleasantly dismissive as a flight attendant pointing to the exit row. "We have time for one more speaker." Arthur rose smoothly. He didn't need the podium microphone. His voice, though quiet, was trained to carry. Arthur Chandler, 214, Lakeside Drive. Karen's smile tightened by a barely perceptible millimeter. "Mr. Chandler, the floor is yours." "I'd like to address Agenda Item 7B, Arthur began, his voice even and measured. "The proposed amendment to the architectural guidelines regarding rooftop solar installations." He held up a single, neatly printed sheet of paper. The proposal, as written, would require all solar panels to be installed on rear-facing roof surfaces only, citing community aesthetics. "I'd like to draw the board's attention to State Statute 167.8, the Homeowners Solar Rights Act, which explicitly prohibits any association from banning solar energy systems or imposing restrictions that significantly increase their cost or decrease their efficiency." He paused, letting the words settle. "As many homes in our community, including my own, have south-facing front roofs, this amendment would directly violate state law and expose the association to significant legal liability." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He simply presented the fact. A single, polished stone of logic dropped into the murky pond of HOA politics. A murmur rippled through the 20 or so residents in attendance. Karen let the silence hang for a full 3 seconds before she spoke. "Thank you, Mr. Chandler, for bringing that statute to our attention." She did not look at the paper he held. She looked directly at him. "However, this is the open forum for general comments. Substantive debate on agenda items is reserved for the board's executive session. We appreciate you putting your thoughts on the record." "This isn't a thought," Arthur corrected gently. "It's a point of order based on established law. Proceeding with a vote on an illegal amendment would be a breach of the board's fiduciary duty." Karen's eyes narrowed. She tapped a perfectly manicured finger on a copy of Robert's Rules of Order, lying next to her gavel. "Your point is noted. The board's legal counsel will review the statute before any final action is taken. The open forum is now closed." With a sharp rap of the gavel, she moved on to the next item, leaving Arthur standing in a vacuum of procedural dismissal. He sat down, the public humiliation a cold, familiar weight. He wasn't angry. Anger was an inefficient emotion. He felt a familiar, cold stillness settle in his chest, the same focus he'd had before a difficult engineering diagnostic on a nuclear submarine. He had made a logical point. She had countered not with logic, but with power. It was a dynamic he understood all too well. and it was a dynamic he would not allow to go unchallenged. The life Arthur Chandler had built for himself at Willow Ridge Lake was one of deliberate, ordered tranquility. After 22 years as a Navy submarine engineer, wrestling with the intricate and unforgiving logic of nuclear propulsion systems, and another decade teaching high school physics, he had earned his peace. His home, a weathered two-bedroom cottage at 214 Lakeside Drive, was his sanctuary. The centerpiece of that sanctuary, more so than the house itself, was the dock. It jutted out 25 feet over the water, a simple, sturdy structure of cedar and steel. It was more than a dock. It was a testament. He and his late wife, Helen, had designed and built the final reinforcements together in the last summer of her life. A final project against the encroaching tide of her illness. The dock was where he drank his coffee as the sun burned the mist off the lake. It was where he taught his granddaughter, Ellie, how to bait a hook and cast a line. It was where he sat in an old canvas chair, the gentle creak of the boards, a conversation with Helen's memory. The dock was his legacy, a physical manifestation of the quiet, resilient life he had constructed. His daughter, Sarah, a pragmatic ER nurse who inherited her mother's warmth and her father's disdain for nonsense, worried about him. "Dad, you have to let these little things go," she'd said over the phone that night after the HOA meeting. "What's the point of retiring to the lake if you're just going to get into fights with the neighborhood busybodies?" "It's not a fight, Sarah. It's about principle," he'd replied, watching a heron stalk the shallows from his porch. When people in charge ignore the rules, small things become big things very quickly. "Just promise me you'll take it easy. Your blood pressure doesn't need a homeowners association." He'd promised, but they both knew it was a promise he might not be able to keep. His precision was his nature. It had kept his men safe in the crushing depths of the ocean, and it was the only way he knew how to navigate the world. He saw Karen often. She was a constant, patrolling presence in the community, her white SUV gliding through the cul-de-sacs. He saw her measuring the height of a neighbor's mailbox with a tape measure, taking photos of another's basketball hoop left out overnight, and leaving prim, passive-aggressive notes on windshields parked too close to the curb. She governed through 1,000 tiny cuts, a relentless enforcement of minutia that wore down the will of the residents. Arthur's property, nestled on the lake's edge, had largely escaped her notice. Until now. The solar panel incident, he suspected, had put him on her radar. He was not a compliant cog in her well-oiled machine. He was an anomaly, a man who read the bylaws and quoted state statutes. He was a threat to her absolute control. He spent the next few weeks in a state of quiet preparation, though he wasn't sure for what. In his workshop, a place of immaculate order where every tool had its place. He pulled out his closing documents from when he'd bought the house. He spread the thick sheaf of papers on his workbench. The HOA's Declaration of Covenants, Conditions, and Restrictions. The CC&Rs was a formidable document. He'd read it cover to cover back then, and he read it again now. His finger traced down the table of contents. He found the section on architectural control and highlighted the definitions. Paragraph 2.1, Definition of Common Area. All real property owned by the association for the common use and enjoyment of the owners. He then flipped to the section on structures. His eyes landed on a particular clause, one he'd noted years ago as being vaguely worded. He highlighted it in yellow, paragraph 8.4.2, View corridors. No structure, planting, or other material shall be placed or permitted to remain upon any lot which may damage or interfere with any easement for the installation or maintenance of utilities, or which may unreasonably change, obstruct, or retard the view from any other lot. A potential conflict. His dock didn't obstruct anyone's view of the main lake, but the clause was subjective. Unreasonably change. Words like that were weapons in the hands of someone like Karen. He put the documents into a heavy-duty binder, tabbed and organized. He was not a man who invited conflict, but he was a man who believed in being prepared for it. He would not be caught off guard. He would build a case so precise, so irrefutable, that it would dismantle any attack before it could gain purchase. He just didn't know when the attack would come. The attack came on a Tuesday, April 20th. It didn't arrive with a shout or a confrontation, but with the quiet, official rustle of certified mail. The green slip in his mailbox sent a cold spike of adrenaline through him. He drove to the post office, signed the logbook with a steady hand, and took the crisp, business-sized envelope. Back in his kitchen, he slid it open with a letter opener. The motion precise and economical. The letterhead was stark: Willow Ridge Homeowners Association, Architectural Control Committee. The text was cold, formal, and utterly devoid of ambiguity. April 20, Reformal Notice of Violation, CCNRs, Par 8.4.2, Property Address, 214, Lakeside Drive, Certified Mail Receipt, NAR 7018, 1130, Yaruo 14592, 8104. Dear Mr. Chandler, this letter serves as a formal notice of a violation of the association's governing documents. It has come to the attention of the Architectural Control Committee (ACC) that the dock structure located at the rear of your property encroaches upon and obstructs the community's view corridor easement, as recorded on the community's official plat map. Specifically, the structure is in violation of CCNRs WAR 8.4.2, which prohibits any structure that may unreasonably change, obstruct, or retard the view from any other lot. Pursuant to the association's enforcement policy, you are hereby required to cure this violation within 30 days of the date of this notice. Curing the violation requires the complete removal of the encroaching structure. Alternatively, you may submit architectural plans for a modified structure that complies with the view corridor for ACC approval. Failure to cure the violation within the specified time frame will result in the imposition of monetary penalties of $100 per day until the property is brought into compliance. Please be advised that the association is authorized to place a lien on your property for any unpaid fines and legal fees incurred in the enforcement of this matter. Sincerely, the Willow Ridge ACC. Arthur read the letter twice. His heart did not pound. His hands did not shake. Instead, a profound and icy calm settled over him. The language was meticulously chosen. View corridor easement, recorded on the community's official plat map. This wasn't a casual complaint. It was a declaration of war, drafted by an attorney. Karen had found her weapon. He looked out the window at the dock. Helen's dock. Their dock. The idea of dismantling it, board by board, was a physical violation, an amputation of memory. The word unreasonable echoed in his mind. It was Karen's beachhead. She had chosen a fight based not on a clear boundary line, but on a subjective interpretation. He walked to his workshop and opened the binder. The inciting incident had occurred. The timeline had begun. He would respond, not with anger, but with documentation. Arthur Chandler's response was a model of dispassionate clarity. He drafted a polite, 2-page letter to the ACC. In it, he respectfully disputed their claim. He explained that the dock predated the establishment of the HOA by nearly a decade and was therefore a grandfathered structure. He stated that his individual property survey, conducted at the time of purchase and filed with the county, clearly showed the dock was situated entirely within his private lot boundaries. He attached 3 exhibits Exhibit A, a certified copy of his property deed. Exhibit B, the official survey map with the dock's location clearly marked. And Exhibit C, a notarized letter from the previous owner attesting to the dock's construction date in 1983. He sent the package via certified mail, creating a mirror paper trail to their own. He was building his fortress, brick by documented brick. He expected a thoughtful review, perhaps a request for more information. What he received a week later was a wall of bureaucratic indifference. A second formal letter from the ACC arrived, this one shorter and colder than the first. May 3. Re-rejection of dispute property address, 214 Lakeside Drive. Dear Mr. Chandler, the Architectural Control Committee is in receipt of your correspondence dated April 26th. After careful review, the committee finds that the evidence you have provided is not sufficient to override the covenants of the community. While your individual survey is noted, the governing plat map for the entirety of the Willow Ridge development, as referenced in the original declaration, delineates a view corridor easement along the western shoreline. This community-wide easement supersedes the boundaries of any individual lot within it. The violation therefore stands. You are hereby summoned to a formal hearing before the Board of Directors to present your case. The hearing is scheduled for the next board meeting on May 20th at 7:30 p.m. in the Community Clubhouse. Should you fail to appear, the board will rule on the matter in your absence and proceed with the fine schedule as outlined in the previous notice. Sincerely, the Willow Ridge ACC. Arthur stared at the phrase governing plat map for the entirety of the Willow Ridge development. It was the foundation of their entire claim. If that map showed an easement, his survey was irrelevant. But if it didn't, he knew he couldn't fight this alone with just his own documents. He needed someone who understood the labyrinthine world of municipal records. He thought of George Miller. George lived 4 houses down, a retiree in his late 60s, who had spent 40 years as a clerk at the Harrison County Recorder of Deeds office. He was a cheerful, slightly stooped man with a passion for local history and an encyclopedic knowledge of property law. Arthur found him in his garden, meticulously tending to his prize-winning tomatoes. He explained the situation, laying out the letters on George's patio table. George read them, his brow furrowed, occasionally letting out a low whistle. View corridor easement on the community plat map, George murmured, tapping the letter. That's a clever one. It sounds official, as all get out. Is it? Arthur asked. George leaned back, a glint in his eye. Maybe. Maybe not. Here's the thing about developments. Art. There are 2 kinds of maps. There's the one the developer shows you in the sales office, the glossy one with the happy families and the perfectly placed trees. We call that the marketing plat. It's a sales tool. Then there's the recorded plat, the one that gets stamped, signed, and filed with my old office. That's the one that's legally binding. We get a lot of HOAs trying to enforce rules based on old marketing materials. Always check the recorded plat. The line landed with the force of a revelation. It was the crucial piece of foreshadowing, the key to the entire puzzle. The next morning, Arthur drove to the Harrison County Government Center. The recorder's office was a quiet, dusty place that smelled of old paper and microfilm. He filled out a request form, and a young clerk retrieved a massive, bound volume of plat maps from the archives. Together, they found the page for the Willow Ridge subdivision, recorded in 1991. Arthur unrolled the large vellum sheet under the library light. His engineer's eye scanned the precise, hand-drawn lines, the surveyor's marks, the legal descriptions. He traced the boundaries of his lot. 214 Lakeside Drive. He saw the property lines. the utility easements for water and sewer, the setback requirements. What he did not see, anywhere along the shoreline, were the words, "View Corridor Easement." There was no such marking, no such restriction. Karen's entire case was built on a lie, a deliberate, calculated misrepresentation. Armed with this new knowledge, Arthur began a deeper investigation. That night, he logged into the HOA's resident portal, a clunky website where they posted community news and official documents. He navigated to the archive of meeting minutes, a digital repository of the board's actions. He started with the records from 3 years ago, the year Karen was elected president. He scrolled through the PDF files, month by month, June, July, August. Then he found it. The minutes from the September meeting of that year. Under the heading, Old Business, was an item review of governing documents and enforcement policies. Most of the item was a bland summary of their discussion. But then, he saw it a large, black rectangle covering an entire paragraph. Beside it, in italics, were the words, "Redacted per attorney-client privilege." A chill went down his spine. Why would a routine review of governing documents require such a heavy-handed redaction? It was a flag, bright red and flapping in the wind. They were hiding something. He downloaded the file, his tactical mind cataloging the clue, the marketing map, the redacted minutes. The pieces were beginning to form a picture, and it was not a pretty one. The microaggressions started a few days later, small but pointed acts of harassment. Sarah came to visit for the weekend. She parked her car on the street in front of his house, a spot where guests had parked for years without issue. The next morning, a bright orange violation sticker was plastered on her driver's side window, citing a rule against overnight street parking that was only sporadically enforced. The adhesive was industrial grade, requiring a razor blade and solvent to remove. A few days after that, his morning newspaper, usually left at the end of his driveway, was found in a puddle 20 feet away, soaked and unreadable. It was impossible to prove, but he knew. Karen was closing ranks, applying pressure from all sides, trying to make his life uncomfortable. She was reminding him that she controlled the neighborhood, and he was an unwelcome guest. He logged each incident in a small notebook, with dates, times, and photographs. The file was getting thicker. The pressure was building, leading to the hearing on May 20th. He knew he couldn't go in just to argue about his dock anymore. He had to uncover why. Why this dock? Why this man? The fight was no longer just about property lines. It was about the truth buried under years of manipulated rules and redacted secrets. George Miller, invigorated by the bureaucratic mystery, had taken it upon himself to do some digging. He had a knack for connecting disparate pieces of information, a skill honed by decades of navigating public records. One rainy afternoon, he called Arthur, his voice low and serious. "Art, I think I found something. It's a bit of a long shot, but the name Delaney, Mark Delaney, does that ring any bells from your Navy days?" Arthur's mind spun back through the years, through the hum of reactors and the close quarters of the submarine. Delaney, Mark Delaney, a lieutenant commander, sharp, ambitious, but with a reckless streak. "Yes," Arthur said slowly. "I remember him. He served under my command on the USS Georgia." "Well," George continued, "I was looking through some old military directories, cross-referencing with local property records. Karen Delaney is married to a Mark T. Delaney. According to his service record, he received an honorable discharge in 2003, but the circumstances, they were quiet." The pieces clicked into place with a sickening thud. The incident, a critical lapse in judgment during a training exercise, nothing that endangered the crew. but a clear violation of protocol that demonstrated a dangerous level of overconfidence. Arthur, as a senior officer on the command staff, had presided over the Board of Inquiry. Their recommendation had been unanimous. Mark Delaney was not suited for the immense responsibility of a submarine command. They had recommended a career redirection. But Delaney, his pride wounded, chose to resign his commission with an honorable discharge. It was a quiet, career-ending moment, shielded from public disgrace, but a devastating blow to a man who had his sights set on being an admiral. "She was there," Arthur murmured, the memory surfacing. At the final debrief, she didn't say a word, just stared at me. The whole time. "This isn't about a dock, Arthur," George said softly. "This is about her husband's career. You were the face of the institution that she believes wronged him. Your dock. It's a symbol of the peaceful retirement her husband never got. She's not trying to enforce a rule. She's trying to dismantle your legacy as payback for what she thinks you did to his." The revelation was staggering. This wasn't a petty HOA dispute. It was a 20-year-old vendetta, a deeply personal war being waged under the guise of bylaws and community standards. The redacted minutes, the fabricated easement, the relentless harassment, it was all fueled by a misplaced, festering rage. Now, Arthur understood the stakes. He wasn't just fighting for his property. He was fighting a ghost from his past. Armed with the truth, Arthur sent a final, carefully worded email to the entire HOA board, CCing the association's management company. He attached the official, stamped county plat map showing the absence of any view corridor easement. He respectfully requested they rescind the violation notice and issue a formal apology for the harassment. He did not mention Mark Delaney. He kept it purely factual. Karen's response was breathtaking in its audacity. 2 days later, an email blast went out to every resident in Willow Ridge. Subject urgent. Notice of special meeting of the members. Dear Willow Ridge residents, please be advised that the Board of Directors has called a special meeting of the members to be held in 2 weeks, on June 5th, at 7:00 p.m. in the clubhouse. The purpose of this meeting is to vote on a proposed amendment to our declaration of CC&Rs. The amendment seeks to formally clarify and codify the view corridor easement along the western shoreline, consistent with the original developer's intent for our community. This is a critical measure to protect the shared scenic beauty of our lake, preserve property values, and ensure equitable access to views for all residents. Recently, questions have been raised regarding the enforceability of our current guidelines. This amendment will resolve any ambiguity and strengthen our governing documents for the benefit of the entire community. Please plan to attend this important meeting and cast your vote. Sincerely, Karen Delaney, President. It was a brilliant, insidious move. If she couldn't enforce a non-existent rule, she would simply create a new one. By calling a full membership vote, she was changing the battlefield from a legal dispute to a political one. She was gambling that she could rally the community with scare tactics about property values and aesthetics, making his dock retroactively illegal. The vote was the new ticking clock. A few days before the meeting, Arthur was at the local grocery store when a woman approached him hesitantly. It was Susan, a newer member of the HOA board, a kind but anxious woman who always seemed overwhelmed in the meetings. "Mr. Chandler," she said, her voice barely a whisper. She glanced around as if expecting Karen to materialize from behind the cereal aisle. I just wanted you to know. She's going door to door. She's telling people your dock is an eyesore and that it will block the view of the fireworks on the 4th of July. She pressed a folded piece of paper into his hand. It was a flyer Karen was distributing, showing a photo of his dock with a crudely drawn red X through it. "Good luck," Susan whispered. before hurrying away. Arthur looked at the flyer. The fight was no longer being waged in private correspondence. It was now a public campaign of misinformation. But he had one thing Karen didn't, the truth. And he would present it in a forum she couldn't control, with a precision she couldn't counter. The special meeting would be his arena. The evening of June 5th was humid and thick with anticipation. The community clubhouse was packed, far more crowded than any regular board meeting. Residents stood along the walls and spilled out into the hallway. They had come for the drama, drawn by Karen's flyers and the whispers that had been circulating for weeks. At the front of the room, a large screen was set up next to the board's table. On it, a digital timer glowed with large red numbers 500. Karen opened the meeting, her voice smooth and confident. She spoke of unity, of preserving the unique character of Willow Ridge. She painted a picture of a community whose very essence was threatened by non-compliant structures and rogue homeowners who put their own interests above the collective good. This amendment, she concluded, her voice ringing with false sincerity, is about fairness. It's about protecting the investment we have all made in this beautiful place. Then, she turned to the agenda. We will now hear from those wishing to speak on the proposed amendment. Speakers will be limited to 5 minutes. Her eyes found Arthur's. Mr. Chandler, you have the floor. Arthur walked to the podium, not with a stack of papers, but with a small laptop and a presenter's remote. He connected the laptop to the projector, and the screen flickered to life. Showing his desktop, he looked out at the faces of his neighbors, then up at the timer as it began its countdown. 4:59, 4:58. Good evening, he began, his voice calm and clear. My name is Arthur Chandler. I live at 214 Lakeside Drive. I am here tonight to ask you to vote no on this amendment. I ask this not for my own benefit, but for the integrity of our community. He clicked the remote. An image filled the screen. It was a high-resolution scan of the official, stamped Harrison County plat map for the Willow Ridge subdivision. This, he said, using a laser pointer to trace a line along the lake, is the legally binding document that created our community. It is filed with the county. It defines every lot, every road, and every legal easement. He zoomed in on the section showing his property. As you can see, there are utility easements. There are setback lines. There is, however, no mention of a view corridor easement. It does not exist in the legal framework of Willow Ridge. 3:59, 3:58. He clicked again. A new image appeared beside the first, a glossier, more colorful map. This, he said, his voice remaining level, is the map the board has been using as the basis for its violation notices. This is a non-binding marketing map created by the developer in 1990 to sell properties. It has no legal authority. Using it to enforce fines or demand modifications to private property is fraudulent. A low murmur spread through the room. People were leaning forward, looking from the screen to Karen, whose smile had frozen on her face. 2:59, 2:58. Another click. The screen now showed two documents side by side. On the left was the redacted page from the HOA meeting, minutes he had found online, with the large black box. On the right was a clean, unredacted version. This is where this stops being a mistake and becomes a deliberate deception, Arthur stated. The document on the left is the version of the September 2021 meeting minutes, available on our community website. As you can see, a key paragraph has been redacted. I filed a state public records request for the unredacted original. That is the document you see on the right. He read the once hidden paragraph aloud. per the advice of our legal counsel. It is affirmed that the developer's marketing map is legally unenforceable for the purpose of restricting property use. Counsel advises that any attempt by the board to enforce easements not present on the official recorded plat map could expose the association to significant legal liability and claims of bad faith governance. The room fell into a stunned silence. The timer on the screen seemed to tick louder in the dead air. He had just proven that the board, under Karen's leadership, knew their claim was baseless 3 years ago and proceeded anyway. 159, 158. This was his moment for the secondary moral twist. He had prepared another slide, a photo he had discreetly taken of Susan's backyard fence, which was 6 inches taller than the bylaws allowed. It would have been the perfect checkmate, proving the board's hypocritical, selective enforcement. He could crush them completely. His finger hovered over the button. He glanced at Susan in the front row. She was pale. Her hands clasped so tightly, her knuckles were white. She looked terrified, but she was also the one who had tried to warn him. He took a breath and made a decision. He did not click the button. He skipped the slide. The board has a solemn duty, he continued, his gaze sweeping across the other board members, to act transparently and in good faith, based on accurate information. This amendment is an attempt to retroactively justify a campaign of harassment that the board knew was legally indefensible. 059, 058. He turned off the projector, and the screen went black. He stepped away from the podium and looked directly at Karen. But his words were for his neighbors, for the community she had tried to fracture. He never mentioned her husband. He never made it personal. Our community must be based on the rule of law, not personal agendas. It must be governed by fairness, not by fear. I urge you to vote no on any amendment that is built on a foundation of lies. He finished speaking. The timer on the screen blinked 000. For a moment, there was absolute silence. Then, from the back of the room, someone began to applaud. It was a slow, deliberate clap, which was quickly joined by another, and then another. Within seconds, the room was filled with a rising tide of applause. It wasn't a thunderous ovation, but something more profound, a sound of immense, collective relief. A resident Arthur recognized as a retired attorney stood up. I call the question, let's vote. Karen, her face a mask of pale fury, was forced to proceed. The vote was taken by a show of hands. It was not even close. The amendment failed in a landslide. Before the chaos could settle, George Miller stood, his voice firm. I would like to make a motion. I move for an immediate, independent audit of all Architectural Control Committee decisions, fines, and legal expenditures made during the tenure of the current president. Second came a chorus of voices. The motion passed almost unanimously. Then, Susan, the anxious board member, stood up. Her voice trembled, but for the first time, it held a note of steel. In light of the information presented here tonight, she said, looking at the other board members, information that was deliberately withheld from the rest of the board and the community. I believe our president has irrevocably broken our trust. I call for her immediate resignation. The room erupted. Karen Delaney, stripped of her procedural armor and exposed, gathered her briefcase with a jerky, unnatural calm. She did not look at anyone. She walked out of the clubhouse and into the humid night air, the sound of her community decisively rejecting her reign, following her out the door. The aftermath of the special meeting was swift and decisive. The following morning, an email from the vice president announced Karen Delaney's immediate resignation from the board, citing personal reasons. The quiet satisfaction Arthur felt was not of victory, but of restoration. The system, once weaponized, had been used to correct itself. The independent audit began the following week, and its findings were damning. It uncovered a pattern of selective enforcement, improperly levied fines, and thousands of dollars in legal fees spent pursuing baseless claims, primarily targeting residents who had previously questioned Karen's authority. The remaining board members, humbled and facing the anger of the community, moved quickly to reform. They established a new transparency committee tasked with reviewing and simplifying the bylaws. And they asked Arthur Chandler to serve as its non-voting senior advisor. He accepted. He filed a modest countersuit against Karen personally for legal fees and harassment. When the court awarded him a settlement, he didn't keep a dime. He signed the check over to the HOA, seeding a new community improvement fund designated for projects that would benefit everyone, starting with a much-needed upgrade to the playground. It was a gesture of peace, a way to turn the capital of his conflict into a resource for the community's future. A few weeks later, his daughter Sarah called, her voice full of a strange wonder. "Dad, you are not going to believe this," she said. "I got an email today from a Mark Delaney." Arthur felt the world stand still for a beat. Karen's husband. "Yes. He found me through my hospital's public directory. He apologized, Dad, for everything. He said he had no idea how far Karen had taken her grudge, that he thought it was just a silly dispute over a dock until he saw the news about the meeting. He said he's been carrying the shame of how his career ended for 20 years, and that Karen's bitterness consumed her. He just wanted to say he was sorry that our family got caught in the middle of it." The words settled a final, deep piece of the puzzle into place. The 20-year-old wound, invisible for so long, had finally been acknowledged and closed. It was an unexpected grace note in a symphony of conflict. That evening, Arthur sat on his dock. The late summer air was warm, and the lake was a sheet of dark glass reflecting the first stars. The dock felt different now. For months, it had been a fortress to be defended. Now, it was simply a dock again, a place of memory, a place of peace. He thought of Helen, of the life they had built, and the quiet principles he had fought to protect. He had come to Willow Ridge seeking tranquility and had found a war, but in fighting it with precision, integrity, and a belief in the fundamental decency of his neighbors. He had not only won the war, he had won the peace he had been seeking all along.